We're going to start with an awkward question, and you don't have to raise your hand. You can just think quietly to yourself. And that question is, have you ever fallen asleep in church? And the next question is, what does that mean about you as a person? Does that mean you're not spiritual enough, not appreciative enough of the beautiful things that are being offered to you? It might. It might also just mean that you're tired. If we think of the story from our lesson of the disciples with the Lord in Gethsemane, the Lord wanted them to stay with him and watch in that crucial moment in his life. But they kept falling asleep. And the Lord understood why. He said, "The spirit indeed is eager or willing, but the flesh is weak." Much though they may have wanted to be there for the Lord, it says their eyes were heavy. And in Luke, it says that they were heavy from sorrow, and the limitations of their flesh let them down, regardless of what their spirits wanted to do. Today, we're continuing a series of sermons on our spiritual reality, understanding the sort of spiritual lay of the land, the context in which we try to live our spiritual lives. And often, this involves looking upward and thinking about heaven and the Lord, and we're going to do some of that, don't worry. But another part of it is understanding how spiritual reality comes down into even things like the fact that we have bodies. The question for today is how can we better navigate our spiritual reality when we take our bodies into consideration? So first we'll talk about what it's like when we do not take our bodies into consideration. Then we'll talk about a couple of different ideas from the Lord's Word about our bodies, their connection with the spiritual world, and as a context for spiritual work. Then we'll talk a little bit about Memorial Day and the connections to that, and then we'll be done. So, here are just a few examples of the kinds of things that we all do when we're trying to do the right thing and handle a situation in the right way, but our bodily circumstances are not exactly helping us. So, there are those times when we are feeling more and more irritable and like nobody is doing anything right and everyone's doing everything wrong, and entirely unrelated to that is the fact that we have not eaten in a while. Or there are times when we're trying hard to focus and be useful and productive, and we also have a terrible headache. Or when we're having a conversation with somebody and it's turning into a difficult conversation and we're feeling more and more impatient and we also really need to go to the bathroom. Or there are times when we're feeling overwhelmed and like we're going to explode or like we can't concentrate, and it turns out we're kind of too hot and our clothes aren't working for us, or we're too cold and our clothes aren't working for us. Or times when we're trying to make an important decision in our lives and our nervous system is just getting more and more panicked. And there are plenty of other circumstances that we find ourselves in which our spirits may be willing to do the right thing, but our bodies are weak. So part of the point then is just to do the things to care for our bodies so that we can have a better foundation on which to do the necessary spiritual work. Listen to this passage from Secrets of Heaven or Arcana Celestia about the point of feeding ourselves. The point of feeding ourselves is to have a sound mind and a sound body. If we starve our body of sustenance, we also rob ourselves of that state of mind and body we are aiming for. When people are spiritual, then, they do not look down on food or on the pleasure it provides. Neither do they make it their goal, but rather a means that serves the goal. And a little bit further on in the passage it says, conclusions can be drawn from this example about other kinds of goodness. So it's inviting us to extrapolate this principle to other things. We should do what's necessary to support our bodies so that it can support our minds and our spirits doing what they need to do. We should get something to eat. We should take a nap or maybe some medicine when we've got a headache. We should change the clothes that we're wearing, take some layers off, put some layers on. We should ask for a pause in the conversation and promise to come back and go use the bathroom and then come back refreshed, etc. Now, these things are certainly easier said than done. We don't always have a choice in the matter about when we can do these things. But you should know that you have permission and even encouragement from the Lord in His Word saying, pay attention to your bodily needs. That's the right thing to do. Being spiritual is not to ignore your body and rise above it and power through and muscle on. No. The spiritual thing to do is pay attention to your body, care for it. So, with that out the way, let's now talk about some ideas about our bodies from the Lord's Word, about their connection to spiritual reality, and as a context for spiritual work. How do you picture the relationship between you and your body? One option is to picture that you are your body, that this is all there is to you. That if your body were to die, that's you gone. And some people believe that. But that's not what the Lord teaches in His Word. And we occasionally have experiences that help us feel some disconnection from this physical body that we have. I mean, there are those times when you wake up and you've slept weirdly and your arm's asleep and you have this strange, that someone else's arm is here. That just gives us a little bit of distance of like, oh yeah, this is a tool that I'm using right now. This is not necessarily a permanent part of me. Or times when we feel sick and that helps us create some distance between who we are and what our body's limitations are. Or as you get older and older and you look in the mirror and it just doesn't look like how you feel on the inside. So we have these experiences that give us hints that maybe this isn't all that there is to us. Another option is to imagine that you have a spirit, but that spirit's sort of a wispy breath, formless ghost thing. And some people picture that. And some people even think that that's the Christian idea, is that we have these spirits that are kind of formless and they inhabit our bodies, and that's how that works. But that, again, that's not what the Lord's Word teaches. Another way you might picture it, and some people have pictured it this way in history, and is like you have a little person living in your head kind of driving this machine that is your body. Like a little mech or robot that you sort of, you're controlling this tool, like a little self controlling this whole tool. And that's getting closer to the truth, but it's still not quite the truth. What the Lord actually teaches, I'll finally get to that now, is that we have two bodies. We have our natural bodies, and we have our spirit actually has a spiritual body. And that spiritual body is in human form. Our lesson said that even while we're still living in these natural bodies, it's actually our spiritual body that sees, hears, smells, and feels things through our natural bodies. Our whole natural body is connected to and corresponds to our whole spiritual body. Listen to a couple passages about this. There is nothing in the mind which does not have a corresponding part in the body, and this corresponding part can be called the embodiment of what is in the mind. The details of our thought and intention are inscribed on our brains and on the whole body as well, since all the elements of our thought and intention move out into the body from their beginnings and take definition there in their outmost forms. So it seems like the best way to picture the relationship between you and your body is to picture yourself in human form, your spirit in your human form, filling every last detail of your natural body. Your natural body is not a perfect representation of your spiritual self. Your natural body can get injured and sick and old, but your spiritual body is a perfect representation of your spiritual self. And when you die one day, you'll be done with this thing, and you'll move on, and then you'll be aware of your spiritual body and everything that it's sensing in the spiritual world. And the Lord tells us that when we're done with the natural body, we'll have such a keener sense and experience of reality. It's like everything in this world is like we're seeing through squinted eyes with plugged ears with a blocked nose. We're wearing thick gloves to feel things. And yes, we are experiencing stuff and sensing things, but won't it be great when we can take those gloves off, when we can open our eyes fully, unblock our ears, breathe fully through our nose, and experience spiritual reality in all its 8K, high definition reality? It's going to be great. And isn't it useful to know that this, what we're experiencing right now, is relatively blunted and blurry? The real thing is so much better. So our bodies are paradoxical in that they are weak and frail and give us this blunted experience of reality. But at the same time, they're also breathtakingly beautiful, incredibly intricate, and the best image we have of everything that matters in existence. As Psalm 139 says, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. How precious are your thoughts to me, O God, how numerous is the sum of them. All the thought and the care and the wisdom and love that the Lord put into the design and function of our bodies is beyond our ability to comprehend. And the teachings of the new church reveal that all the different parts of our natural bodies, from our limbs to our organs, the inside and the outside, all correspond to the different structures and billions of neurons in our brains, which correspond to all the different parts of our spiritual bodies, which correspond to all the different people, angels in heaven and their bodies, and all the communities that they live in are structured in a human form called the grand man or the greatest human, and that corresponds to the Lord, our divinely human God, who created all of us in his image and likeness and breathed life into our nostrils. All of these things correspond to each other. Everything that matters in the universe, people, the Lord, the Word, heaven, all these things are in human form. And our own frail little bodies are our most immediate experience of that. And in them we can see a picture, a representation of all those important realities. So if we're trying to understand how to navigate the fact that we have bodies, it does seem like we should hold on to this reality too. The reality of all that we're connected to through our bodies, through correspondences. Now, it's worth noting that our bodies are also, unfortunately, connected with the monstrous form of hell. Hell is also arranged in a form, but rather than a beautiful human being, it's a terrible monster. And we experience the effects of hell on our bodies through sickness and also through the hells trying to get us to do things to hurt ourselves and hurt other people and to try to feel pleasure in selfish things. And because our bodies are connected with these different realities, heavenly influences and hellish influences, and they're also the place where we feel like we're experiencing things, they can also be a very useful tool for self-examination and self-awareness. Have you ever done the thing where you say, "I'm fine," through clenched teeth while clenching your fists? You might think you're fine, you might be saying the words that you're fine, but your body is telling you something else. And that's useful. It's useful to gain the skills to pay attention to what is my body telling me about what's flowing in. And how can I take that seriously and try to open myself up to something else flowing in? Because there are times when we experience in our bodies, it doesn't come from our bodies, but flows into our bodies, strong desires to do the wrong thing. And it's useful to remember that we are not just our physical bodies. That's part of our experience, but that's not all of us. And it can help us to not act on those things, but instead just pay attention to what's going on. Okay, wow, body, you really want that thing. Isn't that interesting? We don't have to do that. It's okay. We can try to calm our physiological state down, calm our nervous systems down to allow heaven and the angels to flow back in and give us a better perspective on what we should do. So here I think it would be useful to engage with a collection of teachings from one of the books for the teachings of the new church called Divine Providence. And because it talks about how the Lord works with us at all levels, how he's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He's working from the highest things to the lowest things. It's kind of technical, kind of theological, but I think you'll find it's practical in the end. So the topic is how the Lord works with us to help us turn away from evil. And we can be thinking about what role does our body play in that whole process. Divine Providence 1:24 says this: "The Lord never acts upon any one constituent in a person individually without acting at the same time on all their constituents. One constituent cannot be shifted from its position and its state changed except in harmony with the rest. For if one constituent were to be shifted from its position and its state changed, the form, which has to function as a unit, would suffer. In this way, the Lord acts upon every person, directly upon all the constituents of the person's mind, and through these on all the constituents of his body. For a person's mind is their spirit, and in the measure of its conjunction with the Lord, an angel, with the body its obedient servant." So the Lord can't just act on one part of us, like change our minds, and then we're done. He needs to act on all parts at once, and if he's going to change our minds and our spirits, he also needs to change things in our bodies. And that's where we come in. Because for the Lord to be able to work on us and change us, he needs our cooperation. The Lord cannot act from anyone's inmost elements and outmost elements simultaneously without doing so in concert with the person. For the person is present together with the Lord in their outmost elements. We're here in our bodies. Consequently, as the person acts in their outmost elements, which are under their control, being within the scope of their freedom, so the Lord acts from the person's inmost elements and in their subsequent elements to the outmost ones. The things that are in a person's inmost elements and in the subsequent ones extending from the inmost to the outmost are completely unknown to the person, and therefore they are not at all aware of how the Lord is operating there or what he is accomplishing there. The Spirit blows where it will, and we don't know where it comes from or where it is going. But because those inner elements cohere as one with the outmost ones, therefore it is not necessary for the person to know anything more than to refrain from evils as sins and look to the Lord. Only in this way can a person's life's love, which from birth is hellish, be put away by the Lord, and a heavenly life's love be implanted in its stead. So in this division of labor, we work to turn away from evil in our outmost elements, and the Lord does all the rest on the inside. Working in our outmost elements, that's probably not a phrase that you use all the time, but it means working at the lowest level of our thoughts and feelings and also down into our body. Noticing evil thoughts and inclinations coming in from hell and working to reject them. And it means working with how they show up in our bodies, not doing evil and harmful things with our bodies. We will feel the pull to do those things in our physical bodies, and so part of the work will feel like it's in our bodies. Things like sexual desire that leads away from marriage, the desire to hurt and get revenge, the desire to take what's not ours, the desire to greedily consume things that we know will not serve us well, the desire to be puffed up with pride and look down on others with contempt, the desire to control and dominate others. All of these things we will feel in different parts of our bodies. And part of cooperating with the Lord is learning how to recognize those hellish desires and do what we need to do in our physical bodies to reject those desires and not act on them. And it takes a while to learn how to do that. Now shifting our focus to Memorial Day. On Memorial Day, we honor and mourn for people who died while serving in the armed forces. They committed to serving their country and died while serving that use. They made a sacrifice. They laid down their physical bodies in service of their country. So we honor them, and we also honor the family members and friends of the people who died. They also made a big sacrifice. Those friends and family members may still be alive in this world, but their bodies and their brains carry the memory and the mental and emotional wounds of the loss of that person that they love. And so we also acknowledge that pain and that loss. And it's worth thinking about how people who serve in the military and survive and come home also come back with mental and emotional wounds that last sometimes for the rest of their lives. Heaven and Hell 463 says this: "Things that are inscribed on our memory from our intention and consequent thought are inscribed not only on the brain, but also on the whole person, where they take form in a pattern that follows the pattern of the parts of the body." So painful memories inscribed on the brain and the whole person sounds a lot like when people talk about trauma. Now, obviously, that's a whole huge topic on its own, but it seems worth acknowledging that veterans and many other people carry the scars of traumatic experiences in their brains and in their bodies. And that's part of navigating a spiritual life with a physical body. And it's no simple task for people to figure out how to cope with that aspect of being people living in physical bodies. So for now, we'll simply acknowledge how hard that is and try to keep it in mind when we see someone who's clearly not coping with the situation. What is inscribed on their brain and on their body that's not helping them respond appropriately in this situation? And we'll also look to a future when each of us will eventually shed our natural bodies and live on in spiritual bodies in a place where there shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. So in conclusion, you have a physical body that is both weak and also fearfully and wonderfully made. Both of those things are true. We've only scratched the surface of all the ways in which it is significant to our understanding of spiritual reality to better understand our bodies. And I hope you'll talk more afterward about all the different things that have come to your minds. We can remember that it is good and right to care for our physical needs. We can remember that we have a spiritual body as well as a natural body. We can remember that our bodies, down to the smallest details, correspond to everything that matters in existence. And we can remember that our bodies are an indicator of what's going on for us spiritually and a context in which we are invited to work with the Lord. With help from the Lord through His Word and with help from wise other people, we can continue growing in our understanding and compassion for ourselves and in our understanding and compassion for other people as we all navigate our way through our lives in this natural world in these weak and wonderful bodies. Amen.